want to come back to a little more of the founding story experience at Accelerate, but go back because you both obviously met at Northwestern, and there's some interesting entrepreneurial stories there. But just a little context. Talk about where'd you grow up? How'd you the path to being an entrepreneur? We'll talk about where it started.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town 2 hours west of here called Freeport. Kind of the major fun fact from Freeport is that my high school mascot was a pretzel. So we were the Freeport Pretzels. Don't laugh, that's amazing. What was your high school, like Knights or Lions? We had pretzels, it's so unique. But we are officially Pretzel City, USA, and our motto was, if you can't eat it, what was it? You can eat us, but you can't beat us, which doesn't make sense. Because if you eat us, you kind of killed us. But anyway, it rhymed. It was awesome. So that was my Freeport experience. So I wanted to get to a big city, and so I found Northwestern. So I was kind of interested in, design and film, but also interested in kind of history and politics. So I came to Northwestern as a political science and then film major. And then my sophomore year, I met Neal in student government. So Neal was running for student body president, and I was just on one of the committees, and he convinced me to run for a campus-wide position, which I thought was crazy at the time. I was like, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to lose because then 8,000 people know that I'm a loser. And that's not cool. But eventually I did it and was lucky enough to win, and he won student body president. So that was kind of the start of our...
What was your job as a sophomore?
It was academic vice president, which was really funny because I kind of stopped caring about classes after sophomore year. So I don't know if I was the best academic vice president, but it was a fun job, working on behalf of the student body. But yeah, that's where I got to know Neal, and we just basically spent the next 2 years together working with little sleep. So that's the quick story.
That's great. And you're a Chicagoan, Neal? Tell
Yeah,
us.
I'm from the South Side, so grew up on the outskirts of Hyde Park in the Kenwood neighborhood, technically. So I, went to CPS school, then I went to Catholic school at Mount Carmel. I was a football guy. I thought I was gonna go to the NFL or something, but I also ran in the Junior Olympics for 8 years. So I was really passionate about track and field as well.
What did you run? What was your?
So 1, 2, 4, 4x4, 4x1, 4x2.
I was an 800
put,
guy.
Long jump.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He ran track too. But anyway, I was lucky enough, so lucky, to go to Mount Carmel, not only play football and run track, but I did well enough to get into Northwestern, which was like a long shot in my head, but I got in, and it was great. And I thought I was going to be an athlete. So I was going to walk onto the football team, and I was going to run on the track team. Well, I didn't do my homework because Northwestern is the only Big Ten school that does not have a track and field team. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
That's why I tried to walk on a UW-Madison
so bad.
instead of Northwestern.
Anyway, that sucked. So anyway, I decided that because I couldn't run track and
That's
field.
how your due diligence got better.
Yeah, my due diligence got a lot better. And I decided that I was going to focus just on my studies and try to be a good student and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So the short story of this wacky Northwestern experience, at least underclass, is I got to Northwestern, did some reflection on why I'm here and what's the meaning of life and who am I and all that stuff. And at first I came in because I didn't grow up with a lot. We didn't have a lot of money, and it was always a problem. There were always issues of things we didn't have, and I thought I needed to make a lot of money. So when I got to Northwestern, what people do that want to make a lot of money is they study econ, they become an investment banker or consultant. So I studied econ, and I tried to become an investment banker or consultant. And in doing that, I got lucky because I met some people that showed me other things that I could be doing. So while I really pursued finance and I studied econ and I read the vault guides and I prepared for the interviews, I even got some job offers. I got an offer from UBS to work in M&A as an investment banker. The other side of the story is I met Rishi Shah and Derek Moeller freshman year, and we were working on the Nugget Group, which is a finance club in Northwestern, and they had an idea to start a business to put LCD screens eventually in doctors' offices to educate patients while they wait.
For those of you who weren't here, that's Context Media, who was here a couple months ago, and a great story. They mentioned that you worked with them at Northwestern, and I'd love to hear the story of how it really started, because we kind of glossed over the early part.
Right.
We picked up the story where they had this idea talking to Rishi's dad.
Yes, yeah.
But I understand there might be something that
There's-
happened before they got the idea from Rishi's dad, who was a doctor, about this need in doctor's office.
Yes, there was, and most people don't know this, but it was so much fun to get to know those guys. I was 17, 18 years old, freshman in college, second quarter. It was like January, February in 2006. And the original idea, what they tasked me to do, because I was basically learning and working, with and for them, was to make a spreadsheet, a list. This is back when Google Spreadsheets first came out, a list of all the liquor stores in the Chicago area. Because the original idea was to put like beautiful images of cold frosty beer when you walk into a liquor store on its digital screen. So the idea was actually to put LCD screens in liquor stores. But we pivoted because Rishi's dad was an endocrinologist. So his idea was basically like, look, that's not really our passion project. I think we can help way more people if we do this and we educate patients in the waiting room. So I learned so much working for those guys. It was like an incredible experience because by day, I was, trying to be a good student. I didn't do a good job. I didn't do a good job at all. But by night and by weekend and by a lot of my days, I was traveling downtown because they had raised angel money. They had investment, and we were downtown. It was the three of us, and I was hiring people and firing people almost twice my age on the sales team. And it was incredible to learn so much from them. So my whole idea as to what I could be doing with my life kind of got unlocked. So the next year, I ended up leaving Context Media because Rishi and Derek Rishi dropped out of college, and Derek at the time, he had already graduated. I really didn't, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I was a sophomore in college, and I was like, I'm not going to drop out. I should probably stay in school and take what I learned and do something else. So sophomore year, I did something else crazy. I got tired of how expensive it was for black people to get haircuts on the south side of Chicago, and I decided I was going to start a barbershop. So I tried to do that, wrote a business plan, met like 25 barbershops. The barbershop number 26 said, hey, why don't you come in and take over and help me run this shop, and let's open up another one. So we did that. So I started a barbershop.
How'd that go?
It was cool. I learned a lot. I learned that it's not easy. And I also learned that while it was a cool project and it was a good lesson in entrepreneurship, it wasn't really what I felt like the meaning of my life should be. So after like 5 months of running that shop, I decided that, okay, I'm going to be a junior in college. I should probably focus on that. So I kept like moving around. And then junior year, that's when I was very involved in this student organization called ISB, which was the product of, Derek, Rishi, and I like kind of helped build that with some other people. And that was the largest business group at Northwestern. So I was the president of that. And then basically what happened is we had a representative for student government, a senator. And the senator went on medical leave for the quarter. So we didn't have anyone to fill in. So I filled in for a quarter. And in filling in during that quarter, I met Mike in student government. And then I saw all of the things that could have been better about Northwestern itself and the student body. So I decided to run for student body president after that. And that's where I met Mike, and that's where we solved a lot of really hard problems together for Northwestern. And then simultaneously getting elected, I was lucky enough to meet Jim Dugan at OCA Ventures, and that's how I got the job working in venture capital, and that's right around the moment where I turned down the opportunity to work for UBS. So that was a pivotal moment for me because I ended up working in venture capital, simultaneously being student body president, getting to know this guy, and trying to be a full-time student on top of everything. So
Yeah, it was fun to watch that.
yeah, yeah.
I can see why class was hard to make.
Yeah, it was really hard. Like it got to the point where I remember my class schedule was Tuesdays and Thursdays. All my classes were loaded up. They're like 3-hour classes. It was Tuesday 9 to 9, Thursday 9 to 9, straight through all my classes. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I worked from 6 a.m. till 5 p.m. at OCA Ventures downtown. So I'd come straight to the student government office at night, work with Mike, and then on the weekends work all the way through. So yeah, we learned how to work together then. So I think that's a key part that we don't share that much.
You guys might be common law married, I tell you.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Second the finger.
he's the only one I saw, like when we would leave the office for student government, there would be one light on in the other office, and it was always his. He was the only one that could, outwork me from time to time.
I was trying to get gray hair by the age of 20. I almost made it. But.
So what did you do after college?
I guess the best way to start this was 2 months before I graduated. Neal graduated Northwestern in 2009, and about, beginning of April of 2010, I still hadn't found a job. A lot of my friends were getting those consulting jobs and banking jobs, and I was just bored by all that. I was having really a lot of fun being student body president. After Neal was student body president, I was able to.
Do you want to do it like a time freeze? Because I think there's an interesting year leading up to that moment where Mike got that phone call from me that I can talk about because I was out of college a year before him.
Oh, yeah.
So basically what happened is I graduated, Mike became student body president, which was awesome. But then I had to like enter the real world and do real work.
Yeah.
So when I graduated, everyone was like, oh, Neal, great, you did venture capital, you're student body president, you started a couple companies, you've done all these awesome things, what are you going to do now? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know, and I was totally comfortable with that. I knew that I would be okay, and I knew that I learned enough at that point that I wasn't just going to jump into something for the sake of it, that I wanted to focus and figure out what I was passionate about. And in the meantime, I ended up running out of money, so I needed to do something. So I convinced Northwestern to hire me as the first ever alumni Safe Ride driver. And what Safe Ride is, for those of you that don't know, is it's basically a taxi service for Northwestern. So I was the first ever alum that drove Safe, because it was for students to make money on the side when they were at Northwestern. So I made like $11 an hour driving Safe Ride cars by night from like 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. for like 4 or 5 months. And that's how I made ends meet while I was just in my spiritual journey to figure out the meaning of life for me. But then I got lucky enough to get hired by Sandbox Industries. So I met Harper Reed and Troy Hinikoff, who was my professor at Northwestern, and they connected me to Sandbox. And Sandbox, out of nowhere, right before I was going to move to Seattle to create a new life, doing video game development with like Nintendo or Valve in Seattle, I got hired by Sandbox to be basically an entrepreneur in residence. So my job there was come up with awesome ideas because you seem like a scrappy entrepreneur. Take our money, hire a team, build a team of developers and designers, and execute on those ideas. That was my job at Sandbox. Sounds like the best job ever. And it kind of was. But the only problem was that I was hiring developers and designers to make my ideas real. And I lacked the capacity. I felt like I was like an armless architect, Like I didn't have the skills to actually make something real myself. And it was terrible. It was so draining because I had no idea what these people were talking about. And we were burning thousands and thousands of dollars a week on working with people, but they didn't have the passion that I had for the idea. So I went through this for like 5 months, and during that time, Mike was getting ready to graduate, so I guess I will pass the mic.
Yeah.
To Mike.
Yeah. So it was funny about before Sandbox. Like Neal, what he hasn't mentioned at least tonight is like he's really passionate about video games. Like this guy is
I love video games.
A gamer, and kind of one of the passions of that he had was to go to Seattle to get into the gaming industry. And so when I was in my senior year, at least for like the fall of I guess 2009, the idea was like, okay, Neal's going to Seattle. You had never been to Seattle, right?
No, I'd never been. My brother lives there. I never met him.
Yeah. So he was going to go to Seattle.
I was going to live with him.
To get into the gaming industry. And literally like a week before, a week before
I left.
He was all like pretty much packed, ready to go. Like he, had like this marathon of meetings at Sandbox and then got a job offer. And so he like called me up and was like, oh, I'm staying in Chicago. So that's when he got the job at Sandbox. And then fast forward about 5 months. It was April 2010, and Neal gives me a call. And it's like, hey, Mike, I quit my job. I want to learn how to code, and I want you to learn with me. And I was like, okay, sure. I wasn't doing anything better at the time, and it was like all of my prospects were things I didn't want to do. And I kind of got spoiled by working in student government, kind of doing what I wanted to do for the past 2 years. So the prospect of this, for free. Yeah, that's okay. Northwestern, they'll pay us back. We got our bills. But it was just I just wanted to do something that was solving a problem for other people. And then when Neal gave me that call, it was like an opportunity not only to work with Neal, but also to have an opportunity to solve problems for a larger audience. It was 8,000 undergraduates at Northwestern, but it was the whole universe, in terms of working on a startup and building ideas. So that's when I was like, sure, I'll join Neal. And actually, a week later, I got a job offer to work, with an urban prep. So like it came a week too late. So I was like, no, I'm already committed to do this. And I told my mom, I'm like, hey, so I'm just gonna do this startup thing and learn how to code. And I don't have a job right now. And then she was like, what? But she's like, well, as long as you have food and a place to stay. I'm like, yes, I will make that. I'll make that work. So so the place to stay. I don't know if you want me to tell that.
I can, because basically the thing that happened was when I quit my job, it was like a knee-jerk, decision. There was no planning involved. It was like I read Rework by 37 Singles. I read that book. It just came out. And it's funny because in the book it says, don't quit your job. Sorry, like I already had to reject some of what I learned, but I quit my job immediately because I knew that I had to do something different. I needed to teach myself how to do this. And, Mike had some graphic design skill, no coding, but I figured he could focus on front-end coding and I could focus on back-end. And that's what we did. We kind of, focused on that. But when I quit my job, just out of nowhere, I told my dad, I was living with my dad. It's like kind of cheap rent. It wasn't free rent he made me pay, but it was cheap rent. And I said, hey, Dad, quit my job today. And, he gave me that, what the hell's wrong with you look. And then I said, also, I need you to move out because I'm going to move Mike in and we're going to start a company out of this condo. And he thought I was crazy. So 3 days later of negotiating with my dad, I convinced him that we would pay him full market rate rent so he could have a nicer apartment so that Mike and I could convert the condo that I grew up in my whole life into a startup office for him and I to learn how to code.
So I moved into his dad's room. So.
Basically, he did. Yeah. He did. He did. So that's basically what happened. We convinced my dad to move out. We got some furniture from IKEA. We gutted the place, and we just turned it into our hub of learning and executing and building. And it was just this crazy time for us because we didn't know what was going to happen. We were broke. We were cooking every day. We got up at 7 a.m. routinely, met at 7:30, worked till about 11 p.m., day and night for, I guess, a year. So that's what we did.
Now, you guys weren't Accelerate.
No. So we were involved. So Troy, Troy Hinikoff, I guess CEO of Accelerate now, Techstars Chicago.
Well, we actually were going to apply to Accelerate.
We were going to apply to Accelerate with one of our ideas because it was when I was around when Accelerate first was like an idea and it got developed, very similar to how 1871 came to fruition. It was like a community of awesome Chicagoans that came together and said, we need to do this, we need to invest in our community, we need to build better startups and help them out with all the mentorship and community. So it's a fun pattern to have been a part of for the past eight years or so, it seems like 8 or 9 years. And I guess to keep things short, I was very involved in helping Troy out with Accelerate wherever he needed. I was the photographer for some of the events they had. That was how I made a little money on the side. We were trying to get things going. And we were just very involved. So we were there at the initial meetings and all that kind of stuff.
That's great. Now, I want to work in a question here because this is the first time I've had a question get 10 votes.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So, Neal, how much do you curl, and is it hard to find Starter League hoodies that your arms don't bust through?
Oh, wow.
I'm thinking that maybe Starter League people doing that to you.
You even lift? Okay. Yeah, I said I was an athlete before. I just I have a frame, and it's hard. I'm sorry. I have big arms. That's just how it is.
I'm thinking those are friends of yours going for you.
I hope so.
I have big arms.